Resources and circles. Resources. Whether wealthy or destitute, every character is assigned a resources ability. Its starting exponent is determined by how the player spent his character's resource points in character creation. Thereafter, it is used like a skill in-game. Its function is to determine how economically and financially solvent a character is. Can he afford to buy property? Can he keep his equipment in repair? Is he forced to beg for food and lodging? The resource ability allows all this to be determined by the roll of the dice. Circles. Who does the character know from his days as an apprentice? Can he call on his former gangmates for help? Such questions are answered using the Circles ability. It's a measure of the character's social influence, and its scope is shaped by the character's life paths. Gear and stuff. No fantasy role-playing game would be complete without stuff. Swords, armour, books, spells, clothes, shoes, lanterns, etc. All the bits and pieces to make you feel right. In this game, gear augments an ability or reduces or increases a penalty. Swords augment your power stat when your character is trying to kill someone. Lanterns reduce penalties for perception tests in darkness. Clothes keep those social skill test obstacles down. Gear is initially acquired in character burning. In play, gear is purchased via a resources test or even just granted by the GM during appropriate scenes. A knight is granted a new sword and suit of armour by his liege, or a magic helmet is found in the burial mound of a long-dead god, for example. Mostly, though, gear is window dressing that adds detail to your world. Magic. The last element of the game that needs to be mentioned is magic. In Burning Wheel, it comes in many forms. Magic makes possible what could not normally be done by human physical means or ingenuity. Not simply building the pyramids or preserving bodies for thousands of years, but sealing tombs with unbreakable spells and cursing those who desecrate them to die inexplicable deaths. It is the unexplainable and the potent, the mystical power over the elements. In-game, this process is represented by emotional attributes, faith, grief, hatred, and greed, and various magical skills like summoning, enchanting, and sorcery. From hub to spokes. The rules for elements touched on in this chapter are discussed in their individual sections. In the next section, we're going to look at the next level of the rules: how to test your abilities, how to advance, how to tell the other players what you want, and how to get rewarded. The spokes. Testing your abilities. Burning Wheel is very much a game to be played and manipulated for fun and profit, sort of. Dice rolls called for by the GM and the players are the heart of play. These are tests. They determine the result of conflicts and help drive the story. Tests involve the character's abilities, whether it's a health test to recover from an injury, a sorcery test to learn a new spell, or a perception test to spot a pursuer. These are the very fabric of the game. Characters plus situation plus tests equals game. In the system, there are a few ways to roll dice to overcome obstacles. How the successes are counted depends on the desired outcome and the type of conflict. The following section discusses the basic test mechanics, plus the other ways we manipulate dice pools and obstacles. Let's start with the core of the Burning Wheel system. We call it intent and task. Intent. What do you want to do, and why do you want your character to do it? I want to kill him. Great! I kill him is an intent. When declaring an action for the character, you say what you want to do and how you do it. That's the intent and task. When a player states, I kill him, we know his intent. By describing how his character will undertake this intent, he defines the task. Clearly stating and linking task and intent allows players and GM to determine what ability needs to be tested. The result, whether or not the target actually dies, is determined by the results of a dice roll. Roll well and the character comes closer to accomplishing the stated intent. Descriptions of the task are vital. Through them we know which mechanics to apply. Acknowledging the intent allows us to properly interpret the results of the test. Task. A task is a measurable, finite, and quantifiable act performed by a character. Attacking someone with a sword, studying a scroll, or resting in an abbey. A task describes how you accomplish your intent. What does your character do? A task should easily be linked to an ability, the sword skill, the research skill, or the health attribute. Inappropriate tasks are I kill him or I convince him. Those are intents. After such pronouncements, the first question any Burning Wheel player asks should be, how? By what means? The answer, I stab him with my knife, is an appropriate task description for a murderous character. I persuade him to take my side by explaining his wife's affair with the cardinal, is appropriate in the second case. What ability do I roll? Once the description of the intent and task has been stated at the table, the ability needed to complete the action is usually pretty obvious. Stabbing someone is going to require a brawling or knife test. Convincing another character requires persuasion or falsehood test. When adjudicating a test, start with the descriptions in the elements of character. If you need more detail, refer to the character burner and the skill list. If it's ever unclear what ability to roll, the GM should question the player. Get him to describe his action in detail until what needs to happen is clear to both parties. Once the ability to be tested is established, then the dice are rolled. Standard tests. In a standard test, the GM sets an obstacle based on the skill listing, the conflict interaction, or his own judgment. A player rolls his character's ability and needs to come up with a number of successes equal to or greater than the obstacle. Doing so passes the test. The player wants his character to pick a lock. The GM consults the skill list to find the obstacle. He sets the obstacle at 3 based on the type of lock. Thus, the player needs to roll 3 or more successes from his character's skill in order to successfully pick the lock. Versus tests. When two characters come into opposition, a versus test is made, one ability against the other. The character with more successes wins the contest. Moqtada is haggling with a shipwright. I test his G5 haggling against the shipwright's B5. I roll 4 successes on my dice. The GM rolls 3 successes for the shipwright. My character, Moqtada, wins the test. If one character is an aggressor by intent and the other one is a defender, ties go to the defender. If both characters are aggressors, a tie means that neither side has gained an advantage and they are deadlocked. Either the tie must be accepted as the result, a trait must be called on to break it, or the contest must be continued in another arena. Do not re-roll the test. If an assassin is sneaking into a compound, he tests his stealthy skill. A night watchman tests his observation skill to spot him. If a tie results, the watchman wins the test. He is the defending character. If, on the other hand, a burglar is caught at a raid at his local bar, the player tests his inconspicuous versus the watcher's observation. If a tie results, the burglar is the defending character, and he wins the test. Graduated tests. Occasionally a test has no fixed obstacle. It is simply a matter of testing an ability and noting how many successes are generated. This is often the case for research, searching an area, or other knowledge-based skills. The amount of information distributed by the GM is directly dependent on the number of successes generated. Tor asks the GM what his character can remember about the layout of his home village. Can he find the doctor's residence in the dark? He tests his character's village-wise skill and comes up with 2 successes. This is pretty routine knowledge, so the GM nods the affirmative and describes the residence. The information available in graduated tests is rated and judged along the standard obstacle difficulty paradigm. 1 success is obvious stuff, 5 successes is expert knowledge, and 10 successes is a miraculous understanding. GMs can call for graduated tests if they want to use a skill to measure how well a character performs a particular action. Linked tests. Once in a while, the player characters will find themselves in a long-term or complex operation that requires many skills or abilities to overcome. Sneaking out of a harbour and sailing through pirate-infested waters to a remote island, for example. Linked tests can be performed by a single character with many skills, but more often they are undertaken by multiple characters complementing each other. Note that in linked tests, the task happens across time. Each test of skill comes at a certain juncture and leads to the next. It doesn't happen all at once.